Okay, so let's look at how to draw with some of the drawing tools. And we're going to start with the line tool. So I'm going to begin with a new project, ActionScript 3.0, and in this course we're pretty much only going to be creating ActionScript 3.0 projects. You'll see there's a lot of other things we can do, including projects for Android and iPhone and iPad, and we look at those in subsequent courses. So I'm going to choose ActionScript 3.0. I have a stage whose properties is 550 by 400, and for the size of this video I'm going to leave it at that. That's probably a fairly small stage by today's monitor standards or animation standards on the computer. Oftentimes you might do 800 by 600 or 1024 by 768, or if you're creating things that you want full screen on a high def monitor, it's going to be 1920 by 1080 or 1280 by 720. So we looked at the toolbox already. I'm going to come down and select the line tool, and I am working in this first frame. So as I'm drawing, I'm going to create objects in this frame on the timeline of layer 1, and we can have multiple layers. Right now I have one layer, and you'll see that the keyframe here, and I know it's a keyframe because it's a little circle, and I only have one frame in my timeline currently. That circle is hollow, meaning there's nothing on the stage. As soon as I begin to draw a line or some other object, you'll notice that that keyframe kind of grays out and the circle becomes solid black, meaning there's contents on this layer in this frame. I'm going to undo that by pressing Control Z or Command Z on the Mac, or you can also go to the Edit menu and choose Undo. And what's listed there under Undo will change based on the last thing you did. So I'm now back to a blank stage. Let me talk about using the line tool. So with the line tool selected, I get a crosshairs, and I'm going to use whatever color is the stroke color. So right now it's black, and I'm going to position one point, and I'm going to drag to the opposite point, wherever I want that opposite point, the other end point, and I let go of the mouse, and there's my line. And I can draw multiple lines that way. If I change color, my line will change color. Now over in the properties, we can change the stroke for a line. Right now it's 1 pixel, and I can either type into this box, so I might type 5, or I could use the little slider here and change it. And now as I draw a line, I'm going to get a thicker line. Now I'm going to take the selection tool, and I'm just going to draw a box around everything that I've created, and that will select everything. I'm going to delete it. And let's go back to the line tool. So now we got a nice thick red line. The Shift key is the constrainer key, and if I hold the Shift key down and draw a line, I can draw a perfectly horizontal line, a perfectly vertical line, depending on which direction I drag, or a perfect 45-degree angled line. So that's using the Shift key. Now, since this is vectored art, I can always come back and manipulate it. I can select a line. You'll see a little hatch pattern on that line, meaning it's selected, and I could change the color of it. I can also change the stroke of that line. I can take the subselection tool and click on the line, and I'm going to see the 2 endpoints. These are called anchors or vertices. I'm going to grab one anchor, and I can take that endpoint, hold the mouse button down, and I can reposition that endpoint. I can do the same thing with the other endpoint. So once I draw a line, I'm not stuck with where it is. I can also take the selection tool, choose the line again, and move the entire line. I can do the same thing with the subselection tool. I can click on the line, and if I don't grab an endpoint but just grab on the line, I can move it somewhere. Okay, so I'm going to take the selection tool again, draw a box around everything, and delete it. If you make a mistake at any point, want to go back, Control Z is your keyboard shortcut to go back. Again, always going to the Edit menu, you can choose Undo. Another way to get rid of everything is you can do a Control A, which selects all. It's the same thing as if we'd gone to the Edit menu and chosen Select All. Once everything is selected, you can press the Delete key and get rid of it that way as well. Alternatively, we can take the selection tool, click on a line, hold down the Shift key, click on a second line. Now I've got 2 lines selected. If I just want to delete those 2, I can do that and leave the third. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of everything. And I'm going to get a nice black line here. I'm going to make it a little bit thicker so we can see it better. I'll use 5 pixels. And I'm going to draw a line. Now we've seen that we can manipulate the endpoints, but we can also take this selection tool, and as I point to somewhere on that line, notice that my mouse pointer turns to an arrow and a little arc, and I can bend that line. I'm going to undo that, and based on where I position it to begin with, I can manipulate the line all different ways. So that's the selection tool and simply pointing to the line. If I take the selection tool, hold down the Alt key, I can click and drag new points on the line. And any of those segments I could then manipulate by bending. I can take the selection tool and click on any segment, kind of this one in the middle here, and I can pull that segment away from the others. I'm going to do Control Z. I could delete it. I can do Control Z. I could change the color of it. I could even select it and change the stroke. I can take the sub-selection tool, select my line, and I can grab any anchor point and manipulate it. I can grab the whole line and move it. You'll notice that when I click on a point, I get tangential lines. Sometimes people refer to these as knitting needles, and I can grab those tangential lines and manipulate the arc. That is one of the huge advantages of drawing with vectored artwork, is that you can always manipulate it and change it. You don't have to worry about drawing it perfectly the first time. You can kind of sketch things in with lines and circles and ovals and rectangles, and then just manipulate them to get anything you want. I'm going to go back to the selection tool. I'm going to take this segment and just pull it away, and even though I separated the segment, I can deselect it, use the selection tool, hold down the Alt key, and I can add more points. Hard to believe that we started with just a single line, and now we have 3 different segments, each of those with various curves. Again, I'm going to select everything here. I'm going to draw 2 overlapping lines. Let's make the second one a different color. And these lines intersect, and now each segment of those 2 intersecting lines are separated in that I can manipulate them individually. I'm going to do Control Z a couple times. I can also grab a segment, select it, and move it. So by having these lines intersect, it created new objects for me out of my one previous line has now become 2 lines. This is called merge drawing. In a merge drawing, everything interacts with each other. We'll focus a little bit more on the different types of drawing modes. There's another one called object drawing, and just to demonstrate that for now, I'm going to take the line tool, and down here in the properties you will notice a little option of a circle inside of a square. It's called object drawing, and it's a toggle. It can either be turned on or off. What I just demonstrated as far as merge drawing, that object drawing is turned off. But if I turned it on, we're no longer in merge drawing mode, we're now in object drawing mode. And if I draw a line, you'll notice I get a border around it. It shows me that that is an object. I'm going to create another line. This time I'm going to change colors again, and we'll have these intersect. Notice I get a border around that line encompassing the two endpoints. So these are two different objects. These are not merged. So if I come back and grab the red line, notice it's not segmented. It didn't interact with the other object. I can grab the green one. Now if you look closely, you'll notice that the green line is on top of the red line. I can right click on the green line and choose Arrange, Send to Back or Send Backward, either way, and now the red line's on top. Within each layer I can have as many objects as I want, and anything that I draw that is merged will be behind any object. So the objects are always on top within that layer. The merged drawings are always at the background of that layer. I could, however, create a second layer and have objects that are not drawn or that are merged. So let me create two more lines here. I'm going to use blue, and so I'm going to draw a couple lines. Now these are merged drawings. Notice I can separate the segments, and I can individually bend those segments. But notice that the blue is on top of the red and green. That's because they're on this higher layer. If I grab that layer and move it below, it's going to be behind the objects on layer 1. If, however, I select these objects on layer 2, and I'm going to cut them using Control X, where you can go to the Edit menu and choose Cut. I'm going to delete this layer, and then I'm going to paste them on this layer. And as soon as I deselect these, notice they went behind the drawn objects, those that were drawn in object mode. Again, the object mode items are always on top of the merged drawing items on that layer. This idea of drawing in merged or object drawing mode, those two different modes, is very important, and we will explore this more. But now you've seen how to draw with lines, how to manipulate lines, and in the next video we'll look at rectangles and ovals.